Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to another episode of Messy and Masterful. I'm so very happy you could make it to this one. This one is slightly different because it is not a guest that I'm going to be talking about, but it is actually books. Not one book, but 12 books to be exact. I'm going to take you through my reading list, the 12 books that I read in 2023. As you are aware, we speak very often about reading on this podcast, and we always ask our guests to recommend any reading and any books. And you will notice that in my 12 books, I've also taken it upon myself to use some of the reading recommendations from our guests and kind of I will share with you my findings on these 12 books. I am an avid fan of reading. I think it is something that we all need to do. It strengthens our thinking, it improves our mental health, it helps us empathize, it helps us better understand this world. And I am a big advocate of telling people never to stop reading. So that's why we have this episode on. As you are listening to this episode, I am in Doha, in Qatar, attending WISE 11, so the World Innovation Summit for Education, in its 11th edition. And it's about creative fluency, human flourishing in the age of AI. So that's a beautiful title of the event. So it's all about artificial intelligence and how it's going to change our world. And I have the honor of speaking there, of course, listening to loads of people and also interviewing loads of people. And these interviews will be published very shortly as well on the Messy and Masterful podcast. So I cannot wait to hear what you think about these episodes. I am very excited that we can bring all these interviews to you into the new year more specifically. However, before we get there, let me first introduce you to the 12 books of 2023 in episode 71. Messy and Masterful. In this podcast, we speak about the success of people who have achieved, built, or done something amazing, special, remarkable, noteworthy, and/or fabulous. Think of presidents, doctors, chefs, architects, filmmakers, writers, philosophers, CEOs, journalists, and the list goes on and on of people who've had a genuine impact on this world. But rather than underlining their career victories, we speak about the challenges they needed to overcome to actually get there. In each episode, we discuss 3 of such challenges, obstacles, difficulties, and/or hurdles with our guest, putting the messy of their lives next to the masterful. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Aldo, and I'm so happy you could make it. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to Messy and Masterful, and I'm extremely excited you could join us for this episode. No guest for this one. However, in some shape or form, we do have some of our guests with us, the Messy and Masterful guests from the past, because I have taken it upon myself over the past year to read some of the books that were recommended by our guests. Now, we've had over 70 guests thus far, and I haven't read every single book that was recommended by each guest. However, I did get started, and I'm very excited that some of the books that they recommended, they were absolutely drop that amazing, and I'm very, very happy that I went with their recommendation. Other books that I'm going to describe are books that I like myself, so that I was triggered by myself and wanted to find out more about. As an aside, I just wanted to tell you that, as you might know from my episodes, I am a dad of a 4-year-old lovely little girl named Nora. Very happy with that, but I think that many parents of young kids might empathize with me when I say that if you have young kids, then reading isn't really anymore the activity that you can do a lot. I hear many of my friends with young kids who basically say, I had to give up reading or I had to cut back on my reading a little bit. And I had the exact same experience, unfortunately, for the first 3 years of Nora's life. Don't get me wrong, I missed it, but it absolutely wasn't a sacrifice because, of course, there were loads of other things to enjoy as a father. But I did want to get back into it. So 2023 for me has been the year that I could really get back into reading. And I'm very happy that I managed to achieve my target of reading 12 books over a year, which effectively means one book per month. And I'm very happy I made that. The year before, I only got to 8, and now I managed to 12. And also, I really liked to pick up on the recommendations that were made in Messy and Masterful. And that is exactly what the Messy and Masterful book club is going to be about. We're going to be talking about the books that our guests recommend. We're going to dive into as to why guests felt that this was a piece of reading that we should all get into. And then I'm going to give you my humble opinion of the topic, and hopefully you will have a read of the book as well, or will look the book up or try to develop an understanding of the book. So we pass on the torch, if they say. So yeah, I mean, very excited to start with the very first book that I started reading in January, and that is A House for Mr. Biswas by the famous author V.S. Naipaul. And as you can see, V.S. Naipaul, he won the Nobel Prize in Literature. This book was on my shelf for a very long time. In a very long ago, far away past, I worked for a publisher, and then every Christmas we could pick out books for free. And I was ambitious and picked this book. And then for a long time, it was just shelved until one day I said, you know what, I'm going to get into this book. And I did not regret it. So it is about family life, more specifically focused on a life of an Indian family in Trinidad. And it's really wonderful to see kind of how that family as immigrants in Trinidad come together, growing as one of the most powerful families in the country, but also keeping their own identity. The main character in this book is Mr. Biswas, who marries into this family. And it's really amazing to see kind of how he tries to continue to pursue his own identity in the book. It's based on the father of V.S. Naipaul, so his life, loosely based on his life, and it makes up for an amazing read. If you also know that this book was written when V.S. Naipaul was extremely young, and that it is one of his first books, then it's really a very remarkable book. So I can highly recommend V.S. Naipaul, A House for Mr. Biswas. The next book that I read was gifted to me by my brother-in-law, and it's called The Practice of Groundedness. I love my brother-in-law. He is a mathematical computer scientist, and I am not, I can tell you for sure. Whenever we talk, he always looks at me like, my goodness, you have so much to say. And I think this was a little tip of him for me to become more grounded. Richard, if you're listening, thank you very much. But I really appreciated and liked this book. It's a very easy read by Brad Stulberg, who also co-authored Peak Performance. It's basically, the book basically does what it says on the cover, and it doesn't disappoint in that sense that it gives you concrete tips that are not far away from what we know without being too much of a magic wand, if you know what I mean. Because often you have some of those things in there that are slightly too much, at least for my taste, that are too kind of, okay, if you do this, then your life will change instantly. That's not what this book is about. This book definitely gives you some pointers that you can work on, but it still remains with, you've got to do it yourself. Go out there and do it yourself and stay grounded and stay true to who you are. So Brad Stulberg, The Practice of Groundedness. Really loved this book. Next book, The Years by Annie Arnaud. Now you will see that kind of in my selection for novel reading, I went for the big prize winners. And Annie Arnaud is no exception to that. Annie Arnaud, she won the Nobel Prize for Literature, I believe, in 2022, so just last year. And this is her most notable work. So my wife's French. She already read a lot of Annie Arnaud, and they kind of mentioned The Years as Annie Arnaud's most notable work. It is a lovely book. It's a very peculiar book as it describes memories, it describes snippets of ideas, and it just goes on and on and on. So it's really a collection of thoughts and ideas. In the beginning, it was a little difficult to get into them, seeing that it's from, she describes 1941 to 2006. So that's quite a journey through time. But the more you read it, the more you get into it, and the more you also are familiar with those days. It really helped me empathize with France, again, the home country of my wife, and then specifically also the generation of my parents or parents-in-law, kind of how they grew up. And I really love that from a French perspective. The book also comes with loads of French authors and TV programs and actors that I'm not aware of, but it really triggers your curiosity, and it's all wrapped in kind of the most beautiful language. So well done on the ears, and of course, Annie Ernaux. Who am I? But well deserved on that Nobel Prize for Literature. The next book is Demon Copperhead, Barbara Kingsolver. It won the Pulitzer Prize this year and many other prizes. Here it's mentioned on the cover that it is the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction. This book does not disappoint. It's a beautiful book. For those who like to read novels, this is definitely one to take on. Is the story of David Copperfield, by Charles Dickens. That's kind of the structure or the outline used, but then repackaged into contemporary United States, so the United States of today. And then speaking about the main character, Demon Copperhead, is someone who wasn't given a lot to start with in life, and it really dives into the current problems as well in the United States, mainly when it comes to the opioid crisis and kind of the addiction that a lot of people suffer from. The main character is no exception, and you basically see his journey from a young child to a young adult. And the book really takes you on a journey. And I think it's really amazing that Barbara Kingsolver, she's a great author, writes kind of the experience of a teenage boy. So it takes you through that whole journey, which I think is very nicely done. One thing that I ordered it online. One thing that I was really made me scare away a little is the cover. So it's very flowery and very whatever. I often almost want to read incognito. So with this book, I was a little afraid, like, oh my God, people are going to think, what am I reading? I'm one of those people that cares for that. Well, actually, you shouldn't. The book is absolutely wonderful. Its setting is the Appalachian Mountains of Virginia. So highly recommend Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And then the next book that I've read is Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. This book came recommended by many people. I don't think it was one of our guests who recommended this book. I'll double check, but that's not what triggered my curiosity. My curiosity was Hermann Hesse, who is a German author, a very spiritual way of writing very early on. This book is, let me see, from a long, long time ago. I'm looking if I can very quickly find the first publication. It says 1951 here, but I think it's even before that. Anyway, so this book was written in 1922. It's a nice book. It's very spiritual. It's about, looking for yourself. If you read it with the eyes of the 20s and how people thought about their identity and looking for themselves and looking at what is important, I think it's a great book. It's also a good introduction to Buddhism. Hermann Hesse, just like V.S. Naipaul and Annie Ernaux, won the Nobel Prize for Literature. So here again, someone that I picked because of that. So that's kind of the red line here. I went for the big prizes and the big names and the big books because I've got just so much to read. So highly recommend Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. This is also a very quick read. So if you're not a reader and you want to get into reading and you have a spiritual appetite, then I would highly recommend this one. Next one. Viktor E. Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Over 16 million copies sold. This one was recommended by a guest and no one other than Dr. Edith Eger, who we interviewed for The Psychologist back in 2020. 2021, I believe. I love Dr. Edith Eger, and I love her book recommendations. I, of course, love The Choice and The Gift. If you haven't read those already, of course, that those are books that Dr. Edith Eger wrote. And I loved this recommendation by Viktor E. Frankl. So much like Edith Eger, Viktor Frankl, he survived Auschwitz. He barely made it out. And his discovery is basically that what we need in life is kind of a purpose. We're all looking for a purpose. And as long as we have that purpose, we have the ability to survive and basically to get through the most difficult of circumstances. And even in Auschwitz, you can have a purpose and you can look for a purpose, and that can build your existence upon, and it will give you the proper tools to survive. So I think that's really a wonderful notion and a wonderful kind of message. I loved reading this book. The book has two parts. One is slightly more for the psychologists among us. So people who are really interested in psychiatry and psychology. So it gets a little technical. The second part, not too much, but still you got to know a few things. But if you know that after surviving Auschwitz, Viktor E. Frankl became a very renowned scientist, and that kind of his message and his philosophy of finding meaning in life really caught on globally, up to 16 million copies sold, then you're happy to read through those 30 to 40 slightly more academic pages other than the story. So highly recommend Viktor E. Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And the next book. This book, I think, did not go unnoticed in 2023, as the mighty Oprah Winfrey adopted this book as well as its writer to speak about it in detail in podcasts, on social media, in her magazine, Where Have You More, a 700-page book written by Abraham Verghese, The Covenant of Water. And this is an epos, as they say, a beautiful book. Multiple generations of a family in South India. And the family has a condition, and the condition is very typical. And basically you're taken through the family history, but also the history of India, people from Scotland and England going to India, to the people that were born there. So local Indians, it takes you to a leprosy colony. So there's so much in here. It's really a lovely read. It's really a book that I know for sure that I'm going to read again at some point. Abraham Verghese is a master with words. He takes you into, each and every chapter. You really like this book, and it's one of those books that you do not want to end. So The Covenant of Water, Abraham Verghese. Yeah, thank you for writing this. I'm also looking forward to reading more of his books, such as Cutting for Stone, which is also comes highly recommended. So Oprah, thank you for this. A really lovely recommendation. Highly, highly enjoyed it. The next one, Abdul Razak Gurna, Afterlives. Again, here, little theme, Nobel Prize winner for literature. I know. I've picked them kind of on that note. So this one, 2021. This book was gifted to me by my brother, by the way, my brother Baptiste. I really loved reading this book. Again, this is, I think when a writer is successful, it's basically, to my idea, because they can make very complex things, make it read very easy, and basically have the power to take you into an emotion very easily, a fairly complex emotion. So this one is no exception. This one is also about colonialism, but more German colonialism in East Africa, to be exact. Also kind of the extreme poverty that people there experience, combined with kind of new colonial powers taking over the people there. So also different communities coming together, again, the Indian community there in East Africa with the African community. So it's an entire melting pot of things, communities being set up against each other because they work, or basically support other colonial powers. It's an absolute, very strong book, and an absolute lovely read. It reminded me a little bit of V.S. Naipaul, because I do feel there are autobiographical components in this book. I might be wrong, but it speaks basically about the life of, I think, the author's parents. So how they basically, grew into a normal, kind of a normal couple post Second World War and kind of all the things that happened there. It's a love story as well between what I presume are the author's parents, and it's a very, very gripping, very beautiful. Highly recommend Afterlives. I think it's also one of Obama's favorites. So it was definitely on one of his book lists. So definitely worth a read. Next one is If You Want to Write a Book About Art, Independence, and Spirit by Brenda Hewland. This one was a surprise, an absolute surprise. It was recommended to me by guest Guy Kawasaki, the chief evangelist. I believe we also interviewed him in 2021. And this one was an absolute surprise because when I ordered the book and I kind of started reading it, I didn't really get up close and personal with the author. So I just started reading. And then whilst I was reading it, I kind of discovered, not because of words, maybe because I just did some research after, that this book is actually quite old. So, and by old, I mean that I believe that the author passed away, if I'm not mistaken, already in the 70s, if not 80s. So it's really, whereas if you kind of read the words, then it applies to how we interpret, how we read, and how we write today. Brenda Hewland, I think this is her most famous book. She really sits you down with, if you want to start writing, then this is what you should know. And one of the things that I took away from it is be sincere in your writing. Work hard in doing so. It doesn't come naturally. The story of that we're little prodigies all of a sudden, and that on a Sunday afternoon, all of a sudden we take a pen and write entire novels, that doesn't exist. And whatever you do, do it with passion and conviction, and you're worth that passion and conviction. It's a wonderful book. It's a quick read as well, but I took away a lot of it, kind of in also becoming grounded, maybe going back to the book, The Practice of Groundedness. A very, very kind of grounded book about writing. That's exactly it. So Brenda Hewland, if you want to write, thank you very much, Guy Kawasaki, for this recommendation. The next one is The Art and Science of Getting Happier, Build the Life You Want by Arthur C. Brooks. And here she's again, Oprah Winfrey. I think a very good book. I was attracted to it when I heard more about it. I've read more of Arthur C. Brooks. Arthur C. Brooks is a professor at Harvard, and he teaches courses on happiness. And it kind of reminded me of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. We had Dr. Mark Brackett on, and yet so kind of teaching happiness at Harvard sounds a little similar than, emotional intelligence at Yale. And then, of course, the endorsement and co-authorship of Oprah Winfrey just triggered my attention. What I also like about the book is that it kind of gives you good advice and some tough love on how to be happy. And they basically say it's an exercise. It's something you need to do every single day. Similar to how to write. If you want to write, it's kind of continuously like you need to set the standards. You need to make sure that you believe you're worth it and go for things. And that is also in happiness. And it speaks about specific, simple things that we can do, from journaling to talking to people, to reaching out to people, to sports, to kind of all these things that I really like about the book. So I love it for its groundedness. One kind of small point of criticism, perhaps, is that I didn't really feel it was a co-authorship between Arthur C. Brooks and Oprah Winfrey. Oprah Winfrey comes in and out with some letters or something that she writes. So it's kind of little snippets that she gives in. Arthur C. Brooks clearly has the lead in this book. So maybe my expectation of this co-authorship was slightly more than how it comes out in practice. But that's just a very little criticism. I definitely think it gave me some pointers and some things to understand. Again, going with the practice of groundedness. And I think Build the Life You Want it comes with very good grounded recommendations as well. Nothing over the top, nothing weird or fancy. So yeah, love this book. And then the next one. So I stayed into the self-help and building yourself up strategy. This specific book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, was recommended to me by Alison Jones, who I spoke to for the business book publisher this year. Alison knows her books. She publishes many. She's continuously on the road with books, and she recommended this book as an eye opener. And she wasn't lying. I think it's a very nice book, very nicely written. I hadn't heard of this gentleman, Gay Hendricks, but he's a New York Times best-selling author. Also wrote some other books. Why this was an eye opener to me was kind of my expectation was, again, this is slightly kind of do this, do that, and you'll be happy, and everything will happen for you. It's slightly in here, but what I think is most interesting is kind of the author discovers a certain pattern, if you will, of pediments and kind of things we come across on our path, things why we tend to self-destruct. That's actually what the book is about. It basically says that if we're happy, we don't believe ourselves almost. And so many of us, then, if we're happy and we have everything, we cannot possibly want more or cannot be ungrateful or whatever more. And we self-destruct. Something happens in our lives, which is actually slightly subconsciously caused by ourselves, because we do not believe that we can be as happy or be as successful or whatever it is we're looking for. And you need to read it, of course, for yourself. But when I kind of read what kind of obstacles there were, I very much identified with one, which I thought I wouldn't. I thought I would be like, yeah, but actually I very much did. So The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and it also comes with some practical tips and tricks. What I kind of might be, again, small criticism, but I do think it's worth pointing out, is that Gay Hendricks speaks to a lot of successful people. So they're all millionaires, if not billionaires, of highly successful people that self-destruct. I'm a very happy person, but I'm not a millionaire nor a billionaire. I like to think I do some things well, but, so kind of, I'm sure that Gay Hendricks didn't mean for it to be that way, but it kind of has an aftertaste like, okay, what if you're not successful, right? How do you deal with it then? That's not throughout the entire book. It was just a little bit that I was a certain point like, maybe you can talk about a normal person now, right? With a normal family, normal house, nothing over the top, nothing fancy. But then again, talking about only very normal people might make for a boring book. I don't know. The Big Leap, Gay Hendricks, very worth your time and attention. Conquer your hidden fear and take life to the next level. 11 books, and then the last book, The Gene by Siddhartha Mukherjee, the New York Times #1 bestseller, and I think even a Pulitzer Prize was won for this book with very good reason. I was a little bit afraid of this book. I thought that it would be too, because I'm not a geneticist nor biologist, molecular biologist by nature, but I'm very, very, very curious about our DNA and our genes. You might know that I also run another company called Genomes DAO, and I gather a lot of wisdom here from the history of molecular biology. That's the academic field where this belongs. So genetics, essentially. Siddhartha Mukherjee, he is an absolute powerhouse of a writer. It's incredible. He's, of course, the scientist, but then the way he writes, how he talks about it, how he brings in personal stories, not only of himself, but also of the scientists that he writes about, it makes up for a fascinating read. And you kind of completely forget that, at some points he speaks about very technical things in science. You just love it. You just love whatever he writes. Definitely worth your time and your read. I'm going to read more of him because he described this book, The Gene, and then another book, The Song of the Cell, that he wrote as well, that appeared this year. And then his first book, The Emperor of All Maladies, he describes that himself as a trilogy, whereby this one describes the gene, the other one the cell, and then the last one, cancer, the disease cancer, and kind of what it means for us human beings today and what it has meant before. So I'm definitely going to read more of Siddhartha Mukherjee, so you can rest assured that in 2024, on my 12 books list, you're going to have more Siddhartha Mukherjee. Those were my 12 books. I hope this has given you a bit of kind of ideas, fresh ideas about books that you might want to read or that you are curious about. Do write to us if you are curious about, or if you want to share any books with Team Teach Pitch that you would like me to read, that you would like me to go through. A big thank you to the people who recommended the books. So here, Dr. Edith Eager, Guy Kawasaki, and Alison Jones. And over the next year, I'm going to read more books recommended by more guests in Messy and Masterful. Thank you so much for listening to this book special, my 12 books of 2023. We'll be sure to share all the books in our show notes together, to links to where you can buy them if you're interested. It was great having you by our side as a listener in 2023. We've got loads of exciting things coming in 2024, as was announced in the previous episode. I hope you will remain a listener of Messy and Masterful. Thank you so much for being part of the journey. It means a lot. Thank you so much and take care.
If you liked this episode, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Philip Anderson for our beautiful theme music. This episode was edited by Natalie Piles with production assistance from Genta Metalia.